The stars had witnessed many things in their endless burning. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched species crawl from mud and reach for light. They had observed wars that consumed entire systems and peace treaties signed in the ashes. But in all their ancient memory, the stars had never seen anything quite like humanity. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewing window of Ethos Prime, the great neutral station that hung between three spiral arms of the galaxy. Behind her, diplomats from 47 species argued in the Grand Chamber. Their voices rose and fell like waves against stone. The Velkari accused the Ithrani of territorial violations. The Ithrani demanded compensation for damaged trade routes. The ancient Orthani sat in silence, their massive forms still as mountains, watching everything with eyes that had seen civilizations turn to dust. Elena did not turn from the window. She watched the distant stars and thought about home. She thought about Earth, a small blue world that most species in this chamber had never visited. She thought about the history books she had read as a child, the ones that described the world wars, the nuclear standoffs, the centuries when humanity had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times over. The galaxy did not know about those books. The galaxy saw only what humanity chose to show them. Ambassador Vasquez. The voice belonged to Trade Lord Sinith of the Sindari Collective. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that shifted colors based on his mood. Right now, it was pale blue, the color of calculated patience. The Volcari delegation refuses to accept our mediation proposal. Perhaps your famous human diplomacy can succeed where we have failed. There was something in his voice, a subtle mockery that Elena had learned to recognize over her 20 years in galactic politics. The Sindari never said what they truly meant. They wrapped their intentions in layers of courtesy like gifts wrapped in poison paper. Of course, Trade Lord, Elena said. She turned from the window and smiled. It was the smile she had practiced in mirrors for years, the one that showed warmth without weakness. I would be honored to assist. She walked toward the Volcari delegation, her footsteps quiet on the polished floor. The Velkari were reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood. Their ambassador, a female named Kesseth, watched Elena approach with eyes that held ancient suspicion. Ambassador Vasquez, Kesseth said, your reputation arrives before you. They say you once stopped a war between the crystalline swarm and the mining guilds with nothing but words. Words are powerful tools, Elena said. More powerful than weapons sometimes. Sometimes, Kesseth agreed. But not always. The Ithrani have violated our borders. They have stolen resources from our outer colonies. Words will not return what was taken. Elena sat down across from the Velkari ambassador. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for invitation. She simply sat, as if she belonged there, as if there was no place in the galaxy more natural for her to be. Tell me about the colonies, she said. Tell me about the people who live there. Kesseth blinked. In her experience, diplomats talked about borders and trade routes and political consequences. They did not ask about people. There were mining families, Kesseth said slowly. 3rd and 4th generation settlers. They had built communities, schools for their children, temples for their ancestors. And when the Ithrani came, they claimed the territory was disputed. They said our settlers had no legal right to the resources. They brought ships and soldiers and... Kesseth paused. They relocated our people, moved them to processing centers while they reviewed the situation. That was 6 months ago. The review continues. Our people remain in camps. Elena nodded. She had already known this. She had spent 3 weeks studying every report, every communication, every piece of data she could find about this conflict. But knowing facts was not the same as understanding pain. I will speak with the Ithrani, Elena said. I will make them understand. How? Keseth asked. They do not care about our suffering. They care only about resources and profit. Elena leaned forward. Everyone cares about something, Ambassador. The trick is finding out what. She stood and walked toward the Ithrani delegation on the other side of the chamber. The Ithrani were insectoid beings with compound eyes and voices that buzzed like distant machinery. Their lead diplomat, a creature called Vex 9, watched Elena approach with the patient stillness of a predator. Ambassador Vasquez, Vex 9 said, I have heard much about you. The human who speaks softly and carries no stick at all. I carry what I need, Elena said. Words, Vex 9 said. Yes, we have heard. You humans love your words. You build treaties and pacts and agreements. You believe that signatures on documents can change the nature of things. The Ithrani's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The nature of things is simple, Ambassador. The strong take. The weak lose. This has been true since the first cell divided in the first ocean of the first world. Elena did not argue. She simply reached into her jacket and removed a small data chip. Do you know what this contains? She asked. I do not. It contains the navigation routes for every Ithrani trade convoy operating in the Kepler sector. It contains the security codes for your 3 largest orbital stations. It contains the personal financial records of 17 members of your High Commerce Council. Elena placed the chip on the table between them. A gift from humanity to the Ithrani collective. With our compliments. Vex 9's compound eyes fixed on the chip. For a long moment, the diplomat did not speak. How did you obtain this information? Vex 9 finally asked. It does not matter how, Elena said. What matters is that we have it. What matters is that we are giving it to you, instead of selling it to your enemies. What matters is that this is a gesture of friendship and trust, or a demonstration of capability. Elena smiled. Can it not be both? The negotiations continued for 3 more days. Elena moved between delegations like water flowing around stones. She listened to grievances. She acknowledged pain. She made suggestions that somehow seemed to come from the parties themselves rather than from her. And slowly, piece by piece, she built a bridge. The Valkyrie settlers would return to their colonies. The Ithrani would receive compensation for the resources they had already extracted. A joint commission would oversee future mining operations in the disputed zone. Both sides would save face. Both sides would get something they wanted. Neither side would go to war. On the final day, when the agreement was signed, Trade Lord Sineth approached Elena in a quiet corridor. Impressive, he said. His skin was dark purple now, the color of reluctant respect. You have a gift for this work, Ambassador. Thank you, Trade Lord. But I wonder, Sineth continued, what happens when words are not enough? What happens when some species does not want to negotiate? What happens when they simply want to take and destroy? Elena looked at him. For a moment, her smile faded. For a moment, something else showed in her eyes. Something old and cold and very, very patient. Then we find other ways, she said. What ways? The smile returned. Let us hope we never have to find out. 6 months later, Elena Vasquez stood before the full Galactic Council. Beside her were representatives from 47 species. Behind her, a holographic display showed the document that had taken her team 2 years to write. We call it the Galactic Pact of Unity, Elena said. Her voice carried through the vast chamber, translated instantly into 100 languages. It is not merely a treaty. It is not merely an agreement. It is a promise. She touched a control, and the display changed. Words appeared in the common trade script that all species could read. Article 1. All signatory species agree to resolve disputes through arbitration and diplomacy, rather than military force. Article 2. An attack on one signatory species shall be considered an attack on all. Article 3. All signatory species shall share intelligence regarding threats to galactic peace. The articles continued. Elena had helped write every one of them. She had argued over every word, every comma, every possible interpretation. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night for 18 months. And now, finally, it was done. This pact, Elena said, represents the best of what we can be. Not conquerors or victims. Not predators or prey. But partners, allies, friends. She paused and looked out at the assembled delegations. The Valkyrie and the Ithrani sat near each other, their conflict a fading memory. The crystalline swarm had sent observers for the first time in decades. Even the Kethrani, the warrior species who had refused to attend diplomatic functions for centuries, had sent a small delegation. My species has a saying, Elena continued. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Humanity has learned from its history. We have seen what happens when diplomacy fails. We have seen the cost of war. And we have decided, as a species, that we will not pay that cost again. Not if there is any other way. She stepped back from the podium. The Galactic Pact of Unity is now open for signature. One by one, the delegations came forward. The Valkyrie signed first, then the Ithrani. The Sindari signed with a flourish, their silver skins shimmering with satisfaction. The Orthani signed slowly, their ancient hands trembling with age. Even the Kethrani signed, though their war speaker muttered something about words being poor substitutes for action. When it was done, 47 species had committed themselves to peace. 47 species had agreed to stand together. 47 species had put their trust in words on a screen. That night, Elena returned to her quarters on Ethos Prime. She poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle she had, brought from Earth. She stood at her window and looked out at the stars. Her communicator buzzed. She answered it. Ambassador Vasquez, said the voice on the other end. It was Admiral Marcus Chun, commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. Congratulations on the pact. The whole planet watched the signing ceremony. Thank you, Admiral. The Council is pleased. The President sends her personal thanks. There was a pause. There is one other matter. Yes? The Black Fleet has completed its latest round of exercises. All systems are operational. All crews are ready. Elena closed her eyes. The Black Fleet. Officially, it did not exist. It was not registered with any galactic authority. Its ships did not appear on any navigation charts. Its soldiers did not exist in any census. But it was there, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. Waiting. Good, Elena said. Keep them ready. You think we will need them? Elena opened her eyes. She looked at the stars and thought about all the species who'd signed the pact today. She thought about the Sindari and their calculating eyes. She thought about the Kethrani and their warrior pride. She thought about all the ways that peace could fail. I hope not, she said. I hope the pact holds forever. I hope we never have to fight again. I hope that all our preparations are for nothing. But hope is not a strategy, Admiral. Keep the fleet ready. Keep our soldiers trained. Keep our weapons sharp. Understood, Ambassador. The communication ended. Elena finished her wine and went to bed. She dreamed of fire and stars and the sound of children screaming. In the months that followed, the pact held. Disputes were resolved through arbitration. Trade increased between signatory species. The galaxy, for the first time in living memory, knew something like peace. Ambassador Vasquez became famous. She was invited to speak at universities and cultural centers across a dozen worlds. She received awards and honors from species she had never met. Young diplomats studied her methods and tried to copy her style. Through it all, Elena smiled and nodded and said the things that diplomats were supposed to say. She talked about cooperation and understanding and the power of peaceful resolution. But at night, alone in her quarters, she reviewed the reports from Earth's intelligence services. She read about Sindari agents operating in human space. She read about Kethrani war games that simulated attacks on Pact members. She read about whispered alliances and secret meetings and plans that existed only in the shadows. The galaxy thought humanity was naive. The galaxy thought humanity had grown soft. The galaxy looked at the smiling diplomats and the carefully worded treaties and saw a species that had forgotten how to fight. They were wrong. Humanity had not forgotten anything. They remembered every war they had ever fought. They remembered the trenches of France and the beaches of Normandy. They remembered the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They remembered the centuries of blood that had preceded their reach for the stars. They had chosen peace not because they were incapable of war, but because they understood war better than anyone. They had looked into the abyss of their own nature and decided to step back from the edge. But they had not walked away. They had simply built a fence around the abyss and posted guards, just in case. On a small moon orbiting a gas giant in an uncharted system, Admiral Chan walked through a facility that did not exist. He inspected ships that had never been built. He reviewed weapons that had never been designed. He spoke with soldiers who had never been born. "Status report," he said to his second-in-command. "All systems ready, sir. The new stealth corvettes are performing above specifications. The quantum disruption torpedoes have been successfully tested. The infiltration A's have been deployed to all target networks." Good. Chun looked through a viewport at the assembled fleet. Hundreds of ships, all painted black, all running silent, all waiting for orders that might never come. "Let us hope we never have to use any of this." "Do you think we will, sir?" Chun thought about Ambassador Vasquez and her endless optimism. He thought about the Pact and all its beautiful promises. He thought about the looks he had seen in the eyes of certain alien diplomats, the hunger and the contempt and the absolute certainty that humanity was weak. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think we will. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, someone is going to test us. Someone is going to decide that the Pact is just words and that humanity is just another prey species waiting to be conquered. And when they do?" Admiral Chun turned away from the viewport. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "When they do," he said, "we will show them what humanity really is. We will show them why our history books are written in blood. We will show them what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." He paused at the door. "We will show them why we chose peace in the first place. Because we knew, better than anyone, what the alternative looked like. And on that day, the galaxy will understand." "Understand what, sir?" "That there is nothing more dangerous than a species that knows exactly what it is capable of and chooses, every single day, not to be that thing. Nothing more dangerous than a monster that has learned to wear a human face." He walked out into the darkness, leaving his second-in-command alone with the silent fleet. Above them, the stars burned on, patient and eternal. They had witnessed many things, but they had not yet witnessed what humanity could do when pushed to the breaking point. That day was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would learn a truth that humanity had known all along. Peace was not weakness. Peace was the hardest thing there was, and those who built it with their bare hands knew exactly how to tear it down. The pact was signed. The galaxy celebrated. And in the darkness between stars, the Black Fleet waited. Humanity smiled and hoped for the best. But they prepared for the worst, always. 4 years had passed since the signing of the pact. 4 years of peace. 4 years of growing trade and diplomatic exchanges and cultural festivals that brought species together from across the galaxy. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Her face appeared on educational programs watched by billions. Her speeches were studied in academies on 100 worlds, and on a small planet at the edge of human space. The colony called New Horizon was preparing for its annual Founding Day celebration. Sarah Chen was 12 years old. She had lived on New Horizon her entire life. She knew the red dust that covered everything after a windstorm. She knew the taste of water pulled from deep underground. She knew the sound of her father's laughter when he came home from the mining platforms. Today, she was helping her mother hang decorations in the town square. Strings of lights crisscrossed between buildings. Banners displayed the colony's motto, "From Earth, for tomorrow." The smell of cooking food drifted from a dozen restaurants and homes. "Mom," Sarah said, "tell me about Earth again." Her mother smiled. She had been born on Earth, in a city called Mumbai. She had left for New Horizon when she was 23 years old, full of dreams about building something new on the frontier. "Earth is beautiful," her mother said. "Green and blue, with oceans so vast you cannot see the other side. Mountains that touch the clouds. Cities that never sleep. Why did you leave?" "Because I wanted to be part of something new. Because your grandfather said that humanity's future was in the stars." She tied another string of lights to a pole. "And because I met your father at the colonist training program and thought he was handsome." Sarah laughed. Her father was a large, quiet man who worked in the mines and told terrible jokes. He was not handsome by most standards, but he was kind, and he loved Sarah's mother with a devotion that was obvious to everyone who saw them together. "Will I ever see Earth?" Sarah asked. "Someday. When you are older. Maybe when you go to university. Earth has the best schools." Sarah nodded. She tried to imagine an entire planet covered in green and blue instead of red dust. She tried to imagine oceans instead of underground reservoirs. It was difficult. Above them, the sky was beginning to darken. Stars were appearing, one by one, like diamonds scattered across velvet. "Look," her mother said. "The first star. Make a wish." Sarah closed her eyes. She wished for the same thing she always wished for. She wished that her family would always be happy. She wished that nothing would ever change. In the darkness above New Horizon, something was changing. 300 kilometers overhead, a fleet of ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. They were unmarked, their hulls painted black, their identification systems disabled. They had no flags, no insignia, no registration with any galactic authority. On the bridge of the lead ship, a Sindari captain named Veleth studied the planet below. His silver skin was pale green, the color of barely contained excitement. "Targeting solutions confirmed," his weapons officer reported. "All primary population centers are locked." "What about the orbital defenses?" "A single defense station, lightly armed. We can destroy it in the first volley." Veleth nodded slowly. He thought about the briefing he had received 6 months ago in the private chambers of the Sindari Trade Council. He thought about the payment that had already been deposited in his accounts, enough to buy his own moon. He thought about the Kethrani observers on board his ship, watching everything with their cold reptilian eyes. "Are we certain this will not be traced back to us?" he asked. "The ships are untraceable. The weapons are Kethrani manufacture, purchased through 17 shell companies. Even if they find wreckage, it will point to raiders from the outer rim. And the humans? They will mourn. They will investigate. They will find nothing. And in their grief, they will turn to the Galactic Council for help." The weapons officer allowed himself a thin smile. "The Council will debate for months. The Sindari delegation will ensure that no meaningful action is taken. and humanity will learn that their precious pact is worthless. Velith looked at the planet below. Even from orbit, he could see the lights of the colonial cities. He could see the celebration happening in the main square of New Horizons' capital. He could see the strings of colored lights, the crowds of people, the joy. For a moment, just a moment, he hesitated. Then he remembered his instructions. He remembered the wealth that awaited him. He remembered the contempt in the Trade Council's voices when they spoke about humanity and their naive belief in diplomacy. "Fire," he said. The first missile struck the defense station. The second struck the capital city. The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth struck every major population center on the planet. Sarah Chum saw the sky turn white. She did not hear the explosion. Sound traveled too slowly to matter. By the time the roar reached the town square, Sarah and her mother and everyone around them were already dead. The missile had struck 3 kilometers away, but the shock wave and thermal radiation had traveled much faster than any human could run. Across the planet, 2.3 million people died in less than 10 minutes. When it was over, Captain Velith ordered his fleet to withdraw. They left behind nothing but burning cities and the screams of the few survivors on the planet's edges. The stars watched in silence. They had witnessed many things, but they offered no comfort to the dead. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was in her office on Ethos Prime when she received the news. Her assistant entered without knocking, his face pale. "Ambassador," he said, "there has been an attack." Elena looked up from her work. "What kind of attack?" "Where?" "New Horizon. The colony in the Kepler sector." Her assistant's voice shook. They're saying the entire planet has been destroyed." For a moment, Elena did not move. She did not breathe. She sat perfectly still, her hands frozen above her desk. "The entire planet?" She finally said. "Not destroyed. Not completely. But the population centers, the cities, Ambassador, they're all gone. Orbital bombardment. Whoever did this, they hit every major settlement at once." Elena rose from her desk. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to stand straight. She forced herself to breathe. "How many dead?" "We don't have final numbers yet, but millions, Ambassador. At least 2 million. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about all the speeches she had given about peace and cooperation. She thought about all the treaties she had negotiated, all the conflicts she had prevented, all the lives she had saved through diplomacy. None of it mattered now. "Who did this?" she asked. "We don't know. The ships had no identification. We're analyzing wreckage and sensor data, but..." "Find out," Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made her assistant step back. "Use every resource we have. Contact every intelligence agency on Earth. Find out who murdered our people." "Yes, Ambassador." He left. Elena stood alone in her office, looking out at the stars. She thought about her words at the signing of the Pact. She thought about cooperation and understanding and the power of peaceful resolution. Then, she thought about 2.3 million dead. Humans. And for the first time in 20 years, Ambassador Elena Vasquez wanted to kill someone. The Galactic Council met in emergency session 3 days later. The chamber was full. Every signatory species to the Pact had sent representatives. Even species that had never attended council meetings came to witness humanity's response. Elena stood at the central podium. She had not slept since receiving the news. Her eyes were dark with exhaustion and something else that the alien diplomats did not recognize. They had never seen a human consumed by grief and rage in equal measure. 4 days ago, Elena said, an unidentified fleet attacked the human colony of New Horizon. They struck without warning, without provocation, without mercy. They killed 2.3 million of our citizens. Men, women, and children. Farmers and scientists. Teachers and doctors. Families who had done nothing wrong except choose to build their homes on a distant world. She touched the control, and holographic images appeared above the chamber. They showed the burning cities. They showed the bodies. They showed the few survivors wandering through ruins with empty eyes. This is what was done to us, Elena said. This is the crime that has been committed against humanity and against the Pact itself. She paused to let the images sink in. Some delegates looked away. Others watched with expressions that Elena could not read. The galaxy noticed when humanity stopped talking. It happened gradually at first. Human ambassadors attended council sessions but spoke less and less. They voted on routine matters, participated in required ceremonies, and maintained their diplomatic obligations. But they no longer proposed new initiatives. They no longer mediated disputes. They no longer filled the chambers with their optimistic speeches about cooperation and understanding. Trade Lord Sinith noticed first. He had grown accustomed to Ambassador Vasquez's persistent presence, her endless attempts to find common ground, her irritating habit of assuming the best in every species she encountered. Now she sat in her designated seat, said nothing, and left as soon as the session ended. Something has changed with the humans, he told his advisors. They have become quiet. Perhaps they have finally learned their place, one advisor suggested. Perhaps the New Horizon incident has taught them that the galaxy does not bend to their wishes. Sinith considered this. It seemed plausible. Humanity was a young species, barely a century into their galactic journey. Perhaps the loss of a single colony had broken their spirit. Perhaps they had realized that their dreams of peace and cooperation were foolish fantasies. Continue monitoring them, Sinith ordered. But I believe their moment has passed. They built the Pact, and the Pact failed them. They have nothing left. He was wrong, but it would take a full year for him to understand how wrong he was. On Earth, President Tokonquo met with her cabinet in a secure bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. The room was shielded from every known form of surveillance. The walls were lined with materials that blocked electromagnetic signals, quantum entanglement, and even the exotic scanning methods used by the most advanced alien species. Status report, Okonkwo said. Admiral Chun stood and activated a holographic display. It showed a star map with thousands of red dots scattered across human space and beyond. The Black Fleet is fully operational, he said. We have 1,700 capital ships, 4,000 support vessels, and 2 million soldiers ready for deployment. All crews have completed final training exercises. All weapon systems have been tested and calibrated. What about the infiltration programs? A woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. She was the director of humanity's most secret intelligence agency, an organization that did not officially exist. We have deployed dormant programs into every major Sindari and Kathrani network, she said. Military command structures, civilian infrastructure, communication systems, financial databases. The programs are undetectable by their current technology. When we activate them, we can shut down their entire civilization in less than an hour. Okonkwo nodded slowly. And the evidence? Conclusive, Dr. Tanaka said. We have traced the funding for the New Horizon attack directly to Trade Lord Sinith's personal accounts. We have intercepted communications between the Sindari, Trade Council, and the Kathrani war speakers planning the operation. We have identified every individual involved in the conspiracy. Show me. The display changed. It showed dozens of faces, alien and human alike. Sindari trade officials, Kathrani military commanders, mercenary captains who had been paid to carry out the attack, intelligence operatives who had gathered targeting information, Financial specialists who had laundered the payments. These are the ones responsible, Dr. Tanaka said. Every single one of them. Okonkwo studied the faces. She memorized each one. She would remember them for the rest of her life. What about our allies? She asked. The species that stood with us during the Pact negotiations. The ones who expressed sympathy after New Horizon. Most of them have distanced themselves from us, Dr. Tanaka said. They fear the Sundari and the Kathrani. They do not want to be caught in the middle of a conflict. And the Orthani? The elders have offered private condolences. But they have made it clear that they will not intervene in what they call the disputes of younger species. They believe that conflict is a natural part of galactic evolution, and that humanity must find its own path. Okonkwo laughed. It was not a happy sound. So we are alone, she said. We've always been alone, Madam President, Admiral Chun said. We just pretended otherwise. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of what they were planning filled the room like smoke. There is one more thing, Dr. Tanaka said. Ambassador Vasquez has requested a meeting with you. She wants to discuss an alternative approach. She still believes in diplomacy? She believes in exhausting every option before we resort to war. She wants to make one final attempt to resolve this peacefully. Okonkwo considered this. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career building bridges. She had prevented more wars than anyone in human history. She had earned the right to be heard. Send her in, Okonkwo said. Elena entered the bunker 5 minutes later. She looked tired. She had not stopped working since New Horizon, traveling between worlds, speaking with delegations, searching for any species willing to stand with humanity. Madam President, she said, thank you for seeing me. You have been my most trusted advisor for a decade, Elena. I will always make time for you. Then I will be direct. Elena sat down across from the president. I know what you are planning. I know about the Black Fleet and the infiltration programs and the targeting lists. I know that you are preparing for war. Yes, I am asking you to wait. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. Wait for what? The council has closed our case. The Sundari continue to smile at us while planning our destruction. The Kathrani sing war songs about human weakness. What exactly should we wait for? For me to try one more time? Elena leaned forward. Give me 1 year. Let me go to every species in the galaxy and explain what happened. Let me show them the evidence. Let me give them a chance to choose the right side before the fighting starts. They had their chance. They chose to do nothing. They chose out of fear. The Sundari have economic leverage over half the galaxy. The Kathrani have military alliances with a dozen species. Our former allies are terrified of being caught in the crossfire. Elena's voice was steady, but fear can change. If I can show them that humanity will not forget, that we will hold the guilty accountable, that we offer them a choice between justice and complicity, some of them might find their courage. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. She looked at Admiral Chun, then at Dr. Tanaka, then back at Elena. 1 year, she finally said. You have 1 year to build whatever coalition you can. At the end of that year, we act. With or without allies. Thank you, Madam President. Do not thank me yet, Elena. I hope you succeed. But I do not expect you to. Elena stood. She did not argue. She had known the president for too long to believe that arguing would change anything. Neither do I, she said quietly. But I have to try. I owe it to the people who died believing in what we built. She left the bunker and began the longest year of her life. The galaxy watched humanity's silence with growing confusion. The species that had once filled diplomatic chambers with optimistic proposals now sat quietly, observing everything, saying nothing. Human trade ships continued their routes, but they carried fewer goods and made fewer stops. Human tourists stopped visiting alien. We have analyzed the wreckage of the attacking fleet, she continued. We have examined the weapon signatures and the navigation patterns and every piece of data we could recover. The ships were unmarked, but they were not untraceable. She looked directly at the Sindari delegation. Trade Lord Sineth sat in his usual place, his silver skin carefully neutral. We found Sindari communication frequencies in the debris, Elena said. We found Sindari manufacturing signatures on key components. We found evidence that suggests strongly that this attack was funded and coordinated by elements within the Sindari collective. Sineth rose to his feet. These accusations are outrageous and unfounded. The Sindari collective had no involvement in this tragedy. We condemn it in the strongest possible terms. Then explain the evidence. Your evidence is circumstantial at best. Sindari technology is sold throughout the galaxy. Anyone could have obtained these components. You are looking for someone to blame in your grief, and you have chosen an easy target. Elena stared at him. She remembered their first meeting, years ago, when he had mocked her famous human diplomacy. She remembered the barely concealed contempt in his voice every time they had spoken since. We invoke Article 7 of the Pact, she said. We demand a full investigation by the Council into the attack on New Horizon. We demand that all signatory species share their intelligence regarding this matter. And we demand collective action against those responsible. The chamber fell silent. Article 7 was the heart of the Pact. It was the promise that an attack on one species would be treated as an attack on all. It was the foundation on which humanity had built its faith in galactic cooperation. Trade Lord Sineth smiled. The Sindari support an investigation, he said. We have nothing to hide. However, we must caution against hasty action. The evidence presented here is inconclusive. We should not rush to judgment based on grief and speculation. Other delegates began to speak. The Ithrani expressed sympathy, but noted that their resources were limited. The Kathrani questioned whether the attack truly fell under Article 7, since the attackers were unidentified. The ancient Orthani offered condolences, but suggested that patience and reflection were needed before any action could be taken. Elena listened to them all. She listened to the excuses and the delays and the carefully worded nothing. She listened to species she had spent years helping, species whose conflicts she had resolved, species who had signed the pact with promises of mutual support. None of them were going to help. The investigation took 6 months. It concluded that the attackers were unidentified, aggressors, and that insufficient evidence existed to attribute responsibility to any galactic power. The Sindari delegation blocked every attempt to examine their records. The Kathrani refused to cooperate with investigators. The evidence that humanity had collected was dismissed as circumstantial and potentially fabricated. Case archived. No further action. 2.3 million souls archived. On Earth, President Adara Okonkwo addressed the United Human Assembly. They've abandoned us, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. The species we called allies, the council we helped build, the pact we wrote with our own hands, they have all abandoned us. Our dead go unavenged. Our grief goes unanswered. Our faith in galactic cooperation goes unrewarded. The assembly listened in silence. Every representative knew what was coming. They had all read the intelligence reports. They had all seen the evidence that the council had dismissed. I have authorized the continuation of our investigation through other means, Okonkwo said. Admiral Chun's team has spent 6 months tracing the attack to its source. They have found what the council refused to find. She touched a control, and new images appeared. Sindari financial records. Kathrani weapons manifests. Communication logs between Trade Lord Sinith and the Kethrani War Council. The Sindari funded the attack. The Kethrani provided the weapons and the ships. Together, they murdered 2.3 million of our citizens and then blocked every attempt to hold them accountable. President Okonkwo stepped away from the podium. For a long moment, she stood in silence. "I have a question for this assembly," she finally said. "What do we do now?" Representative after representative rose to speak. Some called for immediate withdrawal from the Pact. Some demanded military action. Some urged patience, arguing that escalation would only lead to more death. Finally, an old man stood. His name was David Vasquez, and he was Elena's father. He had been a soldier once, before his daughter had convinced him that diplomacy was a better path. "My daughter spent her life building peace," he said. "She believed, truly believed, that humanity could be better than its history. She believed that we could choose understanding over violence, cooperation over conflict, love over hate." He paused. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "She still believes that. Even now, after New Horizon, she still believes. And I believe her. But I also remember something she told me once, many years ago. She said that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice." He looked around the chamber. "There is no justice for our dead. The Pact promised justice, and the Pact has failed. So what do we do now?" He shook his head slowly. "We wait. We gather our strength. We make sure that the next time someone attacks our people, we are ready to respond. And when the moment comes, when we have found our justice, we make sure that the galaxy never forgets what happens when humanity is betrayed." The assembly voted that night. They voted to remain in the Pact, officially. They voted to continue diplomatic relations with the Council. They voted to smile and nod and pretend that everything was normal. But they also voted for something else. Something that was not recorded in any public document. They voted to prepare. In the darkness between stars, the Black Fleet began to move. Ships that had waited for decades were activated. Soldiers who had trained for wars that never came were mobilized. Weapons that had been designed in secret were tested and refined. Humanity did not announce these preparations. They did not threaten or boast or demand revenge. They simply continued their diplomatic work, their trade agreements, their cultural exchanges. They smiled at Sindari trade lords. They nodded at Kethrani war speakers. They played the role of the naive, peaceful species that the galaxy expected them to be. But underneath the smiles, something had changed. On the ruins of New Horizon, a memorial was built. It listed every name of every victim. 2.3 million names, carved into black stone that would last for millennia. At the center of the memorial stood a statue of a young girl looking up at the stars. Ambassador Elena Vasquez visited the memorial alone. She stood before the statue and read the name carved at its base. Sarah Chun, age 12. Elena did not cry. She had cried enough in the past 6 months. Instead, she made a promise. "We will find the ones who did this to you," she whispered. "We will find them and we will make sure they pay. Not with anger, not with rage, but with justice. Cold, patient, implacable justice." She placed a flower at the base of the statue. Then she turned and walked back to her ship. The stars watched her go. They had witnessed many things. They had seen the birth of empires and the death of worlds. They had observed the rise and fall of 1,000 species. But they had never seen what was coming. Humanity had believed in peace. They had built peace with their own hands, written it into treaties, defended it with words and patience and endless hope. Now they believed in something else. They believed in consequences. And they were prepared to wait as long as necessary to deliver them. Worlds, Human cultural exchanges were cancelled without explanation. On the Kethrani homeworld, war speaker Krethnak addressed his warriors in the great arena of Bone Mountain. "Look at the humans," he said. "They have retreated into themselves. They mourn their dead and do nothing else. We struck at them, and they crumbled. The soft species has been broken." His warriors roared their approval. They had never respected humanity. They saw diplomacy as weakness and peace as surrender. The attack on New Horizon had been a test, and humanity had failed. Soon, Krethnak continued, "We will strike again. We will take their frontier colonies one by one. We will push them back to their little blue planet. And then we will crush them completely." More roars. More approval. The Kethrani believed in strength. They believed in conquest. They believed that the galaxy belonged to those willing to take it. They did not understand what they had awakened. Ambassador Vasquez traveled to 17 worlds in her year of diplomacy. She met with species she had helped and species she had never encountered. She showed them the evidence of Sindari and Kethrani guilt. She explained what would happen if the galaxy continued to do nothing. Most species listened politely and refused to commit. They valued their trade agreements with the Sindari. They feared the Kethrani military. They did not want to risk their own safety for the sake of a distant human colony. But a few listened differently. The Moss Singers of Velith were a peaceful species that communicated through bioluminescent patterns. They had no military, no weapons, no history of conflict. But they remembered that humanity had defended them when the mining guilds had threatened to harvest their forests for fuel. "We cannot fight," their senior singer told Elena. "We are not built for violence. But we can witness. When the time comes, we will tell the galaxy what we saw. We will make sure the truth survives." The Ethrani collective had grown to respect humanity during the decades since the Valkyrie dispute. Their new hive leader, a creature called Vex 12, met with Elena in secret. "We will not join your war," Vex 12 said. "But we will not oppose it either. When the fighting starts, the Ethrani will remain neutral. We will not help the Sindari." "That is all I ask," Elena said. "There is one more thing." Vex 12's compound eyes studied Elena carefully. "We have observed humanity for many years. We have seen your diplomats smile while your soldiers train in secret. We have detected your hidden fleets moving through uncharted space. We know that you are not as soft as you pretend to be. We never pretended to be soft. We simply chose not to be hard. A meaningful distinction." Vex 12 made a gesture that might have been agreement. "When you finish choosing, Ambassador, we will be watching. We suspect the galaxy is about to learn something important about your species." "Yes," Elena said. "I suspect it is." The year ended on the anniversary of the New Horizon massacre. President Okonkwo stood before the United Human Assembly and delivered a single sentence. "Ambassador Vasquez has done everything possible. We have given peace every chance. Now we give it no more chances." The Assembly voted. The vote was unanimous. That night, in the deepest bunkers of Mars and Luna and a dozen hidden stations throughout human space, orders were transmitted. Ships powered up their engines. Soldiers reported to their stations. Weapons systems came online. The Black Fleet had waited for decades. Now it prepared to move. On Ethos Prime, Elena Vasquez sat alone in her quarters. She had spent a year fighting for an alternative to war. She had failed. Tomorrow, the galaxy would burn. Her communicator buzzed. She answered it. "Ambassador," Admiral Chun said. "I wanted to inform you personally. We deploy in 12 hours. I know. The President wanted me to ask if you had any final diplomatic recommendations. Any species we should attempt to contact. Any last-minute negotiations that might limit the scope of the conflict." Elena thought about her year of travel. She thought about all the species that had refused to help. She thought about the Sindari smiling at her while planning humanity's destruction. She thought about 2.3 million names carved into black stone. "No," she said. "I have no recommendations. The time for diplomacy has passed." "Understood." Chun paused. "For what it is worth, Ambassador, I am sorry. I know you believed in the Pact. I know you believed we could be better. We can be better, Admiral. But better does not mean weak. Better does not mean we allow our enemies to murder our children without consequence. Better means we fight when we have to fight and show mercy when we can afford to show mercy. And can we afford mercy now?" Elena closed her eyes. She thought about Sarah Chen, age 12, looking up at the stars. Mercy to the innocent. Justice to the guilty. That is the best we can do. That is the best anyone can do, Ambassador. The communication ended. Elena sat in the darkness, waiting for dawn. In the Sindari capital, Trade Lord Sinith reviewed his morning reports. Human trade activity had decreased by 30% over the past year. Human diplomatic communications had fallen to routine minimum. Human cultural programs had been canceled throughout the galaxy. "They are dying," he told his advisors. "The attack on New Horizon has broken their spirit. Within a decade, they will fade from galactic politics entirely. We will fill the void they leave behind." His advisors agreed. They had all seen the same reports. They had all drawn the same conclusions. None of them noticed the subtle changes in their computer networks. None of them saw the dormant programs awakening in their communication systems. None of them understood that humanity had spent the past year doing something far more dangerous than talking. They had spent it preparing. And now, at last, the preparation was complete. The stars watched in silence. They had witnessed many things. They had seen species rise and fall, empires grow and crumble, wars begin and end. But they had never seen anything quite like what was about to happen. Humanity had spent a century choosing peace. They had built alliances and negotiated treaties and convinced themselves that the galaxy could be better than its history. The galaxy had taught them otherwise. Now they would teach the galaxy something in return. In the darkness between stars, the Black Fleet began to move. 1,700 capital ships, 4,000 support vessels, 2 million soldiers. All of them silent, all of them waiting, all of them ready. The silence was about to end, and when it ended, the galaxy would never forget what came after. The attack began at 04:00 Galactic Standard Time. It began everywhere at once, across 18 Sindari star systems. Every military installation lost power simultaneously. Defense platforms went dark. Communication networks fell silent. Ships in orbit found themselves blind and deaf, their sensors showing nothing but static, their engines refusing to respond. For exactly 17 minutes, the Sindari military ceased to exist as a functioning force. Admiral Marcus Chun watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the Resolute, flagship of the Black Fleet. Around him, officers monitored thousands of data streams, tracking every dormant program as it awakened and spread through enemy networks. Phase 1 complete, his tactical officer reported. All primary targets are neutralized. Sindari command and control is down across all sectors. Casualties? None, sir. The infiltration was completely undetected. Chun nodded. This was what they had planned. This was what they had spent decades preparing. Not blind destruction, but surgical precision. Not rage, but calculation. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. The Black Fleet emerged from the darkness like ghosts becoming solid. They appeared near Sindari military installations, human vessels surrounding alien stations and shipyards with overwhelming force. They had not come to negotiate. They had not come to threaten. They had come to demonstrate. On the Sindari trade world of Kethmer, Station Commander Velik watched in horror as 17 human warships materialized around his orbital platform. He reached for his communication console to call for reinforcements. Console was dead. He reached for the emergency beacon that would alert the homeworld. It was dead. He looked out the viewport at the human ships. They hung in space like predators, their weapons clearly visible, their hulls painted the black of deep space. They did not fire. They did not broadcast demands. They simply waited. Then his communication console crackled to life. A single channel, forced open by the human infiltration programs. "Station Commander Velik," said a human voice. It was calm, almost pleasant. "This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the human warship Retribution. You have 1 hour to evacuate all civilian personnel to the escape pods. All military personnel will remain at their posts. This is an act of war," Velik managed to say. "The Galactic Council will. The Galactic Council had its chance. Your government murdered 2.3 million of our citizens. Your council blocked every attempt at justice. Now we deliver our own justice. We had nothing to do with New Horizon. This station is purely defensive. We are not soldiers. Your station houses the financial servers that process the payments to the mercenaries who attacked our colony. We have records of every transaction. We know exactly what passed through your systems." Velik felt his blood turn cold. He had processed those transactions himself. He had assumed they were routine trade payments. He had not asked questions. "I did not know," he said. "Ignorance is not innocence, Commander. You have 58 minutes. I suggest you begin evacuating." The communication ended. Velik looked at his crew, saw the fear in their silver faces. "Do as they say," he ordered. "Get everyone to the pods, now." 57 minutes later, the last escape pod launched from Kethmer Station. Captain Okonkwo watched it drift toward the planet below, filled with civilian workers who had done nothing wrong except work for the wrong government. "Civilians clear," her tactical officer reported. "Target the reactor core. Minimal yield. I want the station destroyed, not the surrounding space cluttered with debris." "Yes, Captain." A single missile launched. It struck the station's reactor with pinpoint precision. The explosion was brief and contained. When it faded, nothing remained but dust. "Log the action," Okonkwo said. "Kethmer Station destroyed. 0 civilian casualties. All military personnel eliminated." This scene repeated across Sindari space. Human ships appeared, gave warnings, allowed evacuations, and then systematically destroyed every military installation, every weapons depot, every intelligence center. They did not touch civilian cities. They did not target trade ships. They attacked only those facilities connected to the Sindari war machine. The message was clear. We can kill everyone. We are choosing not to. Trade Lord Sinith received the reports in his private chambers. Each one was worse than the last. 18 systems attacked. 47 military installations destroyed. 300 warships disabled or captured. And the humans had not lost a single vessel. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Where did they come from?" "Our sensors detected nothing." "They were already in position, my lord," his military advisor said. The advisor's skin was pale gray, the color of terror. "They have been moving ships into our space for months, maybe years. We never detected them. Our sensors never registered their presence. Months? Our entire defense network should have seen them. Our defense network was compromised. The humans planted programs in our systems years ago. When they attacked, they activated those programs. We were blind from the first moment." Sinith stared at his advisor. He thought about all the times he had dismissed humanity as soft, as naive, as a species that had forgotten how to fight. He thought about his confident predictions that humanity would fade from galactic politics. What about the Kethrani? He asked. Our alliance with them was the foundation of our strategy. Surely they are responding. The Kethrani have their own problems, my lord. On the Kethrani homeworld, War Speaker Krethnak stood on the command platform of his fortress moon and watched his fleet burn. The humans had not disabled the Kethrani systems. They have not needed to. The Kethrani were warriors who despise subtlety. They had responded to the human attack exactly as their nature demanded, with immediate, aggressive counterattack. It had been a massacre. Human ships were faster than Kethrani intelligence had predicted. Human weapons had ranges that exceeded anything in the Kethrani arsenal. Human tactics were not the predictable patterns that the war speakers had studied, but fluid, adaptive responses that seemed to anticipate every Kethrani move. Worst of all, the humans fought with a discipline that the Kethrani could not match. They did not rage. They did not roar. They did not waste ammunition or throw ships into hopeless attacks. They calculated. They coordinated. They destroyed with the cold efficiency of machines. Krethnak had led his personal dreadnought against a human cruiser that was half its size. He had expected an easy victory. The human cruiser had disabled his engines with its first volley. It had knocked out his weapons with its second. It had stopped firing the moment his ship was no longer a threat. Then a human voice had come over his communication system. War Speaker Krethnak, your ship is disabled. Your fleet is destroyed. You may surrender, or you may die. The choice is yours. Krethnak had raged. He had threatened. He had sworn vengeance in the name of every Kethrani ancestor. The human had waited patiently for him to finish. Your surrender or your death, War Speaker. Those are your options. We have no interest in your threats. We have heard threats before. We respond to actions. The Kethrani never surrender. Then the Kethrani die. A single human ship broke from the battle line. It approached Krethnak's disabled dreadnought with weapons powered. For the first time in his life, Krethnak felt fear. Not the battle fear that came before combat, the fear that sharpened senses and quickened reflexes. This was something different. This was the realization that he had made a terrible mistake. This was the understanding that he had helped murder millions of innocent beings, and the survivors had come to collect the debt. Wait, he said. The human ship stopped. I will consider terms, Krethnak said. There are no terms. There is surrender. Complete, unconditional, immediate. You will stand trial for your involvement in the New Horizon massacre. You will face human justice. That is the only option available to you. And if I refuse, then you die, and we present the same offer to whoever takes your place. We will continue until we find someone willing to accept. The Kethrani will have peace one way or another. Krethnak thought about his ancestors, the great warriors who had conquered half a galaxy. He thought about his honor, his pride, his certainty that surrender was worse than death. Then he thought about the humans. He thought about a species that had built peace with its bare hands and watched that peace be destroyed. He thought about a colony called New Horizon and 2.3 million names carved into black stone. He thought about the cold, patient voice on the other end of his communication channel. These were not the soft diplomats he had mocked. These were not the naive dreamers he had dismissed. These were something else entirely. I surrender, Krethnak said. The war lasted 11 days. On the first day, the Sindari military lost 60% of its operational capacity. On the second day, the Kethrani fleet was reduced to scattered remnants hiding in asteroid fields. On the third day, human troops landed on Sindari worlds and arrested every individual on their targeting list. By the fourth day, the galaxy was watching. The Orthani elders emerged from their centuries of isolation to observe the conflict. They had seen many wars. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. They had watched young species destroy themselves in fits of rage and ambition. But they had never seen anything like this. "They are not conquering," Elder Thum said to his fellow elders. "They are not destroying. They are correcting." "Explain," Elder Voss said. "Watch their targets. Every installation they strike is connected to the New Horizon attack. Every individual they arrest has documented involvement in the conspiracy. They are not waging war against the Sindari and Kathrani as species. They are waging war against specific guilty parties. That level of precision is impossible. Apparently not. Apparently, we have underestimated what humanity is capable of." Elder Thum watched a holographic display showing human ships moving through Kathrani space. They passed civilian stations without firing. They ignored fleeing transport ships. They targeted only military vessels and the fortress moons where war speakers commanded their forces. "We called them soft," Thum said. "We told ourselves they had forgotten how to fight. We believed their diplomacy was a sign of weakness. Was it not?" "No." Thum turned to face his fellow elders. His ancient eyes held something that might have been fear. It was a sign of strength. It was a sign that they understood violence so well that they chose to avoid it whenever possible. And now that they have been forced to fight, they are demonstrating exactly why they made that choice. Because they are more dangerous than we imagined. Because they are more dangerous than we can imagine. A species that chooses peace is always more terrifying than one that knows only war. The warrior fights because it is all he knows. The peacemaker fights only when all other options have failed, and he fights to win quickly so he can return to building. The elders watched the war unfold. They watched human ships destroy military targets with surgical precision. They watched human soldiers arrest war criminals with minimal casualties. They watched a species that had spent a century pretending to be harmless finally reveal what it truly was. "What do we do?" Elder Voss asked. "We watch," Thum said. "We learn. And when this is over, we make sure we never give them a reason to fight us." On the seventh day, Ambassador Elena Vasquez broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. "This is not vengeance," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, without anger. "This is not hatred. This is not the blind rage of a wounded animal striking at everything around it. This is consequence." Her image appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. Species that had never paid attention to humanity watched and listened. The Galactic Pact of Unity promised that an attack on one species would be treated as an attack on all. When our colony was destroyed, when our people were murdered, we invoked that promise. The galaxy refused to answer. Elena paused. Behind her, holographic images showed the destruction of New Horizon, the names of the dead scrolling endlessly. We do not blame the galaxy for its fear. The Sindari and Kathrani are powerful. Standing against them requires courage that many species do not possess. We understand this. We forgive this. Another pause. The images changed, showing human ships in combat, precise strikes against military targets, arrest teams securing war criminals. But we will not forget. We will not allow 2.3 million deaths to go unanswered. We will not permit those who murder our children to escape justice because the galaxy is too afraid to act. Elena's voice hardened. So we act ourselves. Not to conquer. Not to destroy. Not to build an empire on the ashes of our enemies. We act to deliver justice. To demonstrate that humanity is not prey. To prove that those who attack us will face consequences. She looked directly into the recording device. To the Sindari and Kathrani civilians who watched this message, You are not our enemies. We have no quarrel with your families, your children, your ordinary citizens. We are targeting only those who planned, funded, and executed the attack on New Horizon. When they have been brought to justice, the fighting will stop. To the leaders who ordered this atrocity, you cannot hide. You cannot run. You cannot buy safety with wealth or political connections. We have spent years preparing for this moment. We know who you are. We know where you are. And we are coming. To the rest of the galaxy, remember this day. Remember what happens when humanity is pushed too far. We chose peace because we believed in it. We still believe in it. But we will not be destroyed by those who mistake our hope for weakness. Elena's image faded. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humanity as soft began to reconsider. On the 11th day, the last Sindari military base surrendered. The last Kathrani war speaker was taken into custody. The last target on humanity's list was crossed off. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Resolute and reviewed the final reports. Total Sindari military assets destroyed or captured, 94%. Total Kathrani fleet strength eliminated, 89%. War criminals in custody, 147, including Trade Lord Sinith and War Speaker Krethnak. Our casualties? 12,000 killed, 30,000 wounded. Chun closed his eyes. 12,000 humans had died to deliver justice for 2.3 million. It was a terrible mathematics. It was the mathematics of war. Send the message to Earth, he said. Inform the President that Phase 3 is complete. All military objectives have been achieved. We await further orders. Yes, sir. Chun looked out the viewport at the stars. They were the same stars that had watched New Horizon burn. They were the same stars that had witnessed humanity's year of silence. They were the same stars that would witness whatever came next. Sir, his executive officer said. Is something wrong? We won, Chun said slowly. We did what we came to do. We destroyed their military capacity. We captured the ones responsible. We delivered justice. Yes, sir. Then why do I feel like this is just the beginning? His executive officer had no answer. The war was over. The killing had stopped. The guilty had been captured. But the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had revealed itself. After a century of diplomacy and peace-building and optimistic speeches about cooperation, they had shown what they could do when pushed to the edge. The stars watched in silence. They had witnessed many things, but they had never witnessed a species that could be both the greatest builders of peace and the most terrifying instruments of war. They had never witnessed humanity. Until now. The trials began 3 months after the last shot was fired. They were held on Ethos Prime, in the same grand chamber where the original pact had been signed. The galaxy watched as Trade Lord Sinith, War Speaker Krethnak, and 145 other defendants were brought before the tribunal. The judges came from 12 species. Humanity had insisted on this. They wanted the galaxy to see that justice was not revenge. That law was not merely the will of the powerful. That consequences could be delivered fairly and openly. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the gallery on the first day of testimony. She watched Trade Lord Sinith take his place in the defendant's chair. His silver skin was pale and colorless, the shade of someone who had not seen sunlight in months. Trade Lord Sinith, the lead prosecutor said, "You stand accused of conspiracy to commit mass murder. You stand accused of funding the attack on the human colony of New Horizon. You stand accused of obstructing justice by blocking the council investigation into that attack. How do you answer these charges?" Sinith looked around the chamber. He saw the faces of a dozen species watching him. He saw the recording devices that would broadcast his words across the galaxy. He saw the evidence stacked in holographic displays, the financial records and communication logs, and targeting data that proved his guilt beyond any doubt. For a moment, Elena thought he might deny everything. She thought he might claim innocence, blame subordinates, insist that he had been deceived. Instead, he laughed. "How do I answer?" Sinith said. "I answer with the truth. Yes, I funded the attack. Yes, I coordinated with the Cathrani. Yes, I blocked your investigation. And I would do it all again." The chamber fell silent. "You do not understand," Sinith continued. "None of you understand. Humanity was growing too powerful. They were building alliances across the galaxy. They were positioning themselves as the mediators of every dispute, the architects of every treaty. In another century, they would have dominated galactic politics without firing a single shot. So you decided to destroy them?" The prosecutor asked. "I decided to put them in their place. I decided to remind them that the galaxy is not a debating society. I decided to show them what happens to species that forget that power comes from strength, not from words. You murdered 2.3 million civilians. I culled a colony of dreamers and idealists." Sinith's voice was cold. "I removed a threat to Sindari interests. I did what any responsible leader would do to protect his people." Elena watched his face as he spoke. She looked for remorse, for doubt, for any sign that he understood what he had done. She found nothing. "You admit your guilt," the prosecutor said. "I admit that I took action against an enemy. Whether that action was legal under your precious pact is for you to decide. But I will not pretend shame. I will not perform regret for your entertainment. I did what I believed was necessary, and I would do it again." The trial continued for weeks. Witness after witness presented evidence. Survivors of New Horizon described the attack. Intelligence analysts explained the paper trail linking Sindari funds to mercenary accounts. Communication experts played intercepted messages where Sinith discussed the human problem. With Cathrani war speakers, War Speaker Krethnak was more difficult to prosecute. He did not justify his actions with political calculations. He simply refused to acknowledge that he had done anything wrong. "I am a warrior," he said when asked about his involvement. "Warriors fight. Warriors kill. This is the nature of our species. You ask me to feel shame for being what I am. I cannot do this." "You participated in the murder of millions of civilians," the prosecutor said. "I participated in a military operation against a rival power. The fact that you call them civilians does not change their nature. They were humans. We were at war with humans. We struck at humans. There was no declared war. There is always war. Some species simply pretend otherwise." Krethnak looked at the human observers in the gallery. "Your people understand this now. They have learned what we always knew. The galaxy is a battlefield. Peace is merely the space between conflicts. And do you feel any responsibility for the deaths you caused?" Krethnak considered the question. For a long moment, he was silent. "I feel responsibility for the defeat," he finally said. "I underestimated humanity. I believed them to be weak and soft and easily broken. I was wrong. They are strong and hard and utterly ruthless when provoked. This is a lesson I have learned at great cost. But no responsibility for the civilian deaths? They are dead. I cannot bring them back. What purpose would my regret serve?" The verdicts came on a cold morning in the third month of trials. Tradelord Sinith was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to spend the remainder of his life in a prison facility on a barren moon far from any Sindari world. He would never see his homeworld again. He would never conduct another trade negotiation. He would die alone, surrounded by enemies, forgotten by the species he claimed to serve. War Speaker Krethnak was found guilty on all counts. His sentence was the same: life imprisonment, isolation, exiled. 143 other defendants received similar verdicts. Some had planned the attack. Some had funded it. Some had simply known about it and failed to act. All of them had played a role in the death of 2.3 million humans. When the last sentence was announced, Elena Vasquez left the chamber. She walked to a quiet observation deck and looked out at the stars. Admiral Chun found her there an hour later. "The galaxy seems to approve of the verdicts," he said. "Most species are expressing satisfaction with the tribunal process. They appreciate that we did not simply execute the guilty. We considered it," Elena said. "I know, but you argued against it. Justice is not the same as vengeance. If we had killed them, we would have been no better than they were. We would have proven that we are just another species willing to slaughter our enemies when given the chance. Some would say we proved that during the war." Elena turned to face him. "We fought a war we did not want. We killed soldiers who were trying to kill us. We destroyed military targets that threatened our people. But we did not murder prisoners. We did not bomb cities. We did not slaughter civilians." "No," Chun agreed. "We did not. That is the difference, Admiral. That is what makes us what we are. We have the power to destroy, but we choose restraint. We have the ability to conquer, but we choose justice. We could have burned their worlds and salted the ground and ensured that no Sindari or Kethrani would ever threaten us again, but we did not. Because that is not who we want to be." Elena looked back at the stars. "My grandfather used to tell me about the old wars on Earth. He said that the hardest thing about victory was not achieving it. The hardest thing was deciding what kind of people we wanted to be afterward. The choices we make in triumph define us more than the choices we make in struggle. And what kind of people do we want to be? The kind who build. The kind who remember mercy, even when we have been shown none. The kind who believe that the galaxy can be better than its worst moments." Chun was silent for a long time. "Do you still believe that?" he finally asked. "After everything that has happened? After New Horizon and the war and everything we have lost?" Elena thought about the question. She thought about Sarah Chen, age 12, looking up at the stars. She thought about 2.3 million names carved into black stone. She thought about the years she had spent trying to find alternatives to war and the failure that had followed. "Yes," she said, "I still believe. Not because the evidence supports it, not because history suggests it, but because the alternative is despair, and I refuse to despair. Even now, especially now, we have proven that we can fight. We have proven that we can win. Now we must prove that we can build something better from the wreckage." 1 month later, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber looked different now. The Sindari delegation sat in chains, their representatives selected by a transitional government that humanity had helped establish. The Kethrani sent only a single observer, his war paint removed in shame. The elder species who had counseled patience and reflection sat in uncomfortable silence. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium. She looked older than she had 5 years ago, when she had first presented the Pact. Her hair was streaked with gray. Her face was lined with exhaustion and grief, but her voice was strong. "We are here," she said, "to begin again." She touched a control, and a holographic document appeared above the chamber. The Galactic Pact of Unity failed. It failed because it was built on words alone. It failed because we trusted that species who signed their names to agreements would honor those agreements. It failed because we believed that goodwill and mutual interest would be enough to prevent atrocity. She paused, letting the words sink in. We were wrong. We were naive. We were, perhaps, too hopeful for our own good. And 2.3 million of our citizens paid the price for our hope. Elena looked around the chamber. She saw fear in many faces. Fear of humanity. Fear of what had been revealed. Fear of what might come next. But we are not here to abandon hope. We are here to make hope stronger. We are here to build something that cannot be broken as easily as the first pact was broken. The holographic document expanded, showing its contents. This is the second pact. It is not a replacement for the first. It is an evolution. It includes everything the first pact promised, and it includes something more: consequences. Elena began to walk around the podium, speaking to different sections of the chamber. Article 1. All signatory species agreed to resolve disputes through diplomacy rather than military force. This has not changed. Article 2. An attack on one signatory species shall be considered an attack on all. This has not changed. Article 3. The new provision. Any species that violates Articles 1 or 2 shall face collective response from all signatory nations. Not debate. Not investigation. Not months of deliberation while the guilty obstruct justice. Response. Immediate, coordinated, overwhelming. She stopped in front of the Orthani delegation. You counseled patience, she said. You suggested we wait and reflect. And while we waited, while we reflected, the guilty walked free. This will not happen again. Under the second pact, patience is not an excuse for inaction. Reflection is not a substitute for justice. She moved to the Ithrani section. You stayed neutral. You protected your trade interests. You watched while we bled. We do not blame you for your fear. But the second pact requires more than neutrality. It requires that signatories choose sides. If you cannot commit to collective defense, you cannot share in collective protection. Finally, she returned to the central podium. We are not asking for power. We are not seeking to dominate the galaxy. We are asking for something simpler, a promise that has teeth, a treaty that cannot be ignored, a pact that means what it says. She looked at the assembled delegations. Humanity will sign first. We wrote this document. We will be bound by its terms. If we ever attack a signatory species without cause, the galaxy will respond against us. We accept this risk because we believe in what we are building. Now the question is, who will sign with us? For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly the Moss Singer of Velith rose from his seat. His bioluminescent patterns flickered in the sequence that indicated solemn promise. Velith will sign, he said. We cannot fight, but we can witness. We can record. We can ensure that the truth survives. And we believe that what humanity offers is true. The Ithrani Hive leader rose next. The collective has debated. We have calculated risks and weighed benefits. And we have concluded that a galaxy with the second pact is safer than a galaxy without it. The Ithrani will sign. One by one, other delegations rose. Species that had remained silent during the first pact negotiations. Species that had watched the war from a distance. Species that had looked into the fire of human wrath and understood what it meant. Even the Orthani, ancient and proud, eventually stood. We have observed humanity for a century, Elder Thum said. We have watched them build and negotiate and hope. We have seen them fight and win and show mercy. We do not know what the future holds, but we know that humanity is not what we believe them to be. They are more. They are better. And they are more dangerous than anything this galaxy has ever seen. He paused. The Orthani will sign. Not because we fear humanity, but because we respect them. They have earned the right to lead. By the end of the day, 53 species had signed the second pact, more than had signed the first. More than anyone had expected. That night, Elena Vasquez took a shuttle to the New Horizon Memorial. She walked alone through the fields of black stone, reading the names carved there. 2.3 million names. 2.3 million stories that had ended too soon. She stopped at the statue of Sarah Chun. The girl still looked up at the stars, her face full of wonder and hope. "We did it," Elena whispered. "It took longer than it should have. It cost more than it should have. But we did it. The galaxy has a new pact. The guilty are in prison. And humanity is stronger than we have ever been." She placed a single flower at the base of the statue. "I do not know if you can hear me. I do not know if there is anything beyond this life. But I wanted you to know that we kept our promise. We found the ones who did this to you. We made them face justice. And we built something that will protect other children from suffering what you suffered." Tears ran down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. "Sleep well, Sarah Chen. Sleep well, all of you. The galaxy remembers what happened here. And we will make sure it never happens again." She stood for a long time, alone with the dead. Then she turned and walked back to her shuttle. Above her, the stars burned on. They had witnessed many things in their endless existence. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched species destroy themselves and transcend themselves. They had observed the best and worst of what intelligent life could achieve. But they had never seen anything quite like humanity. A species that chose peace because they understood war. A species that showed mercy because they knew the cost of cruelty. A species that built bridges because they had once burned them all and remembered the ashes. The Orthani elder had said it best in words that would echo through history. We called them soft. We called them naive. We forgot the oldest truth. The species that chooses peace is always more dangerous than the one that knows only war. Because when they finally fight, they fight for something worth killing for. Humanity had fought. Humanity had won. And now humanity was building again. Not because they had forgotten the dead. Not because they had forgiven the guilty. Not because they believed the galaxy would never threaten them again. They were building because that was what they did. They were builders. They were dreamers. They were the species that looked at the stars and saw not enemies to destroy, but neighbors to meet. And they were the species that, when pushed too far, could become the most terrifying force the galaxy had ever witnessed. Both things were true. Both things would always be true. In her shuttle, rising toward the stars, Ambassador Elena Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. The second pact was signed. The galaxy was watching. And humanity was exactly what it had always been. Dangerous, hopeful, unstoppable. The stars welcomed them home. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between worlds, the Black Fleet waited. Always ready, always watching, always prepared for the day when humanity would need to remind the galaxy what it truly was. That day might never come. The second pact might hold forever. The galaxy might finally learn to live in peace. But if it did not, if some future species decided to test humanity's resolve, they would learn the same lesson that the Sindari and Kathrani had learned. They would learn that there is nothing more dangerous than a monster that has taught itself to love. Because such a monster knows exactly what it is giving up when it chooses to fight. And it fights without mercy, without hesitation, without doubt. It fights to win. And then, when the fighting is done, it puts down its weapons and builds something beautiful from the ashes. That was humanity. That had always been humanity. And that would always be humanity, for as long as the stars continued to burn.